Yeah, hi folks. Yes, Hertz is dumping 20,000 electric cars from its American fleet. Yes, the EV con is over. Now, who would have guessed? And all of this BS climate scam is driven by the global communists at the WEF, like Klaus Schwab, for example, all to control you. And this is what happens when you allow woke, virtue signalling CEOs to take charge.
Tesla on the company's new agreement with car rental giant Hertz.
A few months out of bankruptcy, said it's going to order 100,000
Tesla Model 3s. Those purchases, total value of about $4.2 billion.
In October 2021, Hertz publicly announced it intended to buy 100,000 Tesla vehicles. Shares of both companies soared.
Check out shares of Tesla soaring to all-time highs today, launching the company into the trillion-dollar club for the first time.
First mover advantage aside, it would help Hertz distinguish itself in an industry plagued by commoditization, where the color of a brand's signage seems to be the only differentiator.
If you or I went to the airport and we went to the green counter, the red counter, or the yellow counter, we're still going to get the same white Toyota Camry.
But only a couple of years in, while the rental company is posting strong finances, its EV strategy is facing some serious challenges. Pricing troubles, skyrocketing repair costs, and low resale values.
There's no technology change, EVs included, that run a straight line without some hiccups. And
Wow, you ignorant prick. $4 billion worth of hiccups just out of bankruptcy.
Hitting where it hurts, the rental car giant announcing it will sell 20,000 of their electric vehicles, making the switch back to gas, citing higher than expected expenses. This after the White House previously praised the company. Here to react is former EPA Chief of Staff Mandy Gisakura. Mandy, thanks for joining us this morning. So Americans don't want these cars, and it's really interesting to see how the rental cars, nobody even wants to rent them.
No, you're exactly right. And we've known this for quite some time. When I was serving during the Trump administration from 17 to 20, we did something called a midterm evaluation where we were talking to the best and brightest engineers and forecasters, and they predicted that at best, EV sales would make up around 6% of the market. Well, if you look today, they're around 1% of the on-road market share. New car sales are a little bit higher, but 1%, and that's because of what you just alluded to. Consumers do not want these types of vehicles because of things like range anxiety. There is not reliable charging infrastructure. And the fact that you have a winter storm coming across this nation, electric vehicles perform about 30% worse in cold weather conditions. And that's not the type of vehicle you yourself want to get in or you want to put your family in, not knowing whether you're actually going to get from point A to point B in a safe, reliable manner.
You know, Mandy, if I was a tyrannical globalist and I wanted to force everybody into an EV car, then I would be focused on charging stations. And they had their transportation bill. It was, I don't know, $1 gazillion as all their bills are. Why didn't they make charging stations, build them everywhere? Where are they?
Yeah, well, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act allotted $7.5 billion of taxpayer funds, and the Biden administration took that money and sat on it for about 2 years, not building out a single electric charging entity that's reliable. So you have these major shortcomings that continue to play into those range anxieties with consumers. So they're not really doing their part. Look, what they really want to do is they want to limit Americans' ability to freely move around this country. You allude to the tyrannical globalists. It's all about control. And
Yes, and it all emanates out of the WEF, and Klaus is now coming after your cars as well.
The World Economic Forum is coming for your cars. That pseudo-fascist organization, which brings together elites from government and the world's most powerful corporations, has now unveiled a new plan to reduce private car ownership around the world by 75%. Of course, this is justified under the pretense of fixing the weather and fighting climate change. The usual nonsense, they're not very creative. But as anyone with a brain surely understands, this so-called climate change agenda that groups like the WEF are pushing is not motivated out of concern for the environment. These people couldn't care less about the environment. That's why they never propose banning private jets. What they really want is complete domination over you. These WEF elites, people like Klaus Schwab and John Kerry and Bill Gates, they speak openly about how they want to control the food you eat, the energy you're allowed to use, the type of home you are allowed to live in, what you're allowed to think, what you're allowed to say in public. And now they're after your cars because they want to take away your freedom of movement. By eliminating private car ownership, the plebes like you will be left with mass transportation as your only option, meaning your overlords will be able to monitor you 24/7 and dictate when you're allowed to move and where you're allowed to go. Control people's movements, and they are your slaves.
We meet for the 20th. I hope I will have the pleasure still to be invited for the meeting. When we meet for the 20th Governance Summit, you will use an app like Uber, but not anymore to call some driver, but automatically guided car, a self-driven car, will come to your hotel or wherever you are and will bring you to the airport. No, Los Angeles is one of the cities with the heaviest traffic, who told me in 2030 Los Angeles will be private car-driven free. And this will allow to transform highways into parks and other public spheres.
Now, Judge Janine sums it up best.
It's the consumer who will decide whether or not the electric vehicles are going to be part of the mainstream. Look, the consumers don't want it. When you have Hertz, who's going to sell 20,000 vehicles at a loss of something like $250 million of these electric vehicles, because people don't even want to rent them. I mean, you've got a real problem. And 57% of the people in this country don't want to buy them. That's because they cost over $50,000 each, whereas your gas vehicle, the average price is $30,000. And EVs in 21, 22, and 23, 79% of them had more problems than vehicles with combustible engines, okay? There are problems. The government set aside $7.5 billion for these charging stations, and there's not a one has been installed yet, okay? So, I mean, stop trying to force us to do something we don't want to do. And I got to tell you, part of my resistance, part of my anger is because this battery is being made in China. All right, well, China's got these coal-fired plants, and they are creating all kinds of problems with the environment. We're giving them business to create these batteries that no insurance company wants to insure, that when they die, they're an environmental problem. And the American people don't want the car. The manufacturers don't want to make the cars. Ford now is cutting back the manufacturing of electric vehicles to half of what they did. And the bottom line is the only people making money are the people who are making the batteries, and that's China. And let me just go a little more on China, just because I want to. On Monday, this administration decided that Chinese nationals coming across the border, instead of answering the 40 questions that everybody else has to answer, they only have to answer 5 questions, following the uptick in Chinese nationals. Okay, I'm tired of giving China the benefit of the doubt. I don't want to buy a car that they're responsible for building, and I think the American people agree, and that's it.
And not only are EVs useless, they are dangerous as well.
I don't know about you, but there's nothing I hate more than having the wool pulled over my eyes, and that's exactly what I feel is happening with this story. There's a lot to be suspicious about, especially when you see the incredible video clip I've been sent by a local resident, which is coming up later in this video. So a couple of days ago, I put out this video about a beach house in New Zealand that had burnt down, and that it was alleged that it was caused by some kind of electric vehicle. Initial reports from the media quoted eyewitnesses who said the fire started in the EV, which then spread to the garage and subsequently to the rest of the house. But then later on the media changed their story and said that the EV was not to blame. So let's dig into this a bit further and see if we can get to the truth. If you're looking for EV and net zero sanity, you're in the right place. If you like this kind of content, it'd be great to have you as a subscriber, and don't forget to enable all notifications so you never miss another episode. So the initial media reports indicated that some kind of EV was responsible for the start of the fire. News Hub says Fire and Emergency New Zealand hasn't confirmed the cause of the fire, but neighbours told News Hub the fire started while an electric car was charging in the garage. One News said a witness told One News that the initial fire started in the garage where a hybrid car was parked. And also the New Zealand Herald repeated that information, saying that a witness told One News that the initial fire started in the garage where a hybrid car was parked. And then there's this grab from a TV news segment in New Zealand which basically says the same.
The house burnt down today at Cook's Beach in the Coromandel, with reports the fire started in a garage where an EV was parked.
A blazing inferno that locals say was caused by an electric car catching fire while charging in the garage.
So all of these media outlets are basically saying the same thing. Eyewitnesses who were on the scene when the fire started said that it was caused by an EV with the fire spreading to a garage. But then 2 days later, on the 18th of December, the New Zealand Herald put out another article saying this. Social media posts and a media outlet then reported a witness as saying the fire had been started by an EV, electric vehicle, in the home's garage. But Fire and Emergency New Zealand FENS investigator Ed Hopping said that this was not the case. The investigation is still ongoing, but I'm comfortable to put it out there in the world that the fire wasn't a result of the battery in the car failing, Hopping said. He said the fire started within the home while the car was parked outside the garage and was not plugged in for charging at the time. It's just important to put out there that hybrid cars aren't that vulnerable to fires, Hopping said. And then in this instance, the car wasn't plugged in and wasn't inside the garage or the structure. Based on Fenn's experience so far, he said it isn't common for fires to be started by electric vehicles in New Zealand. So I'm glad we're getting all the key points of the message out in this article. So being the pain in the arse that I am, I emailed the Fire and Emergency New Zealand media office with the following questions. Multiple eyewitness reports claim that a fire started in a hybrid vehicle that was parked outside the garage, and initial media reports also indicated this, e.g. fire destroys house at Cook's Beach, Coromandel. That was a New Zealand Herald article. However, a subsequent report in the New Zealand Herald states, and I just quote the same thing I've just read, how was the investigator able to conclude so quickly and before the investigation was complete that the fire was not a result of a hybrid battery fire? Please kindly supply the basis on which this conclusion was reached, i.e. evidence of the fire starting elsewhere within the property. Thanks and regards, Simon. And the reply I got was a bit cryptic. It didn't answer any of the questions directly that I'd asked, but it just referred me to another media article. Kia ora, Simon. Further quotes were provided in this story. Link. The 3 quotes to note. I can't comment on the cause because the investigation is not yet completed, but I can say where it did not start, and that was in the garage. And the car did not have anything to do with it, and it was parked outside of the garage at the time. And it looks like the fire started at the rear of the property. It did not start where the car was. Okay, take mental note of that very carefully because it's going to be relevant in a minute. It's all very tidy, isn't it? Nothing to see here, folks. Please disperse.
Please disperse. Nothing to see here.
But take a look at this clip sent to me by one of my viewers. It's only about 4 seconds long, so I'll play it at full speed and then we'll go through it a bit more slowly. So as you can see, this video is very early on in the fire. The first responders aren't even there yet, and people are just standing around watching. You can see that the only part of the house where smoke is coming from is the section where the car and the garage are. The rest of the house is not involved at all at this point. You can see that quite clearly from the plume of smoke. It's in front of the rest of the house. And as we get closer, we can see that the garage itself is on fire. The car, which is, I understand, a Mitsubishi plug-in hybrid, is also on fire. And the edges of the garage are on fire. And the car. But there's no sign of the rest of the house being involved at this stage. And I don't see any evidence of the fire having started at the rear of the property, which is completely out of sight compared to this view. Also, if we take a look at this drone footage here, when the house is completely ablaze, I'm just going to stop it here, and you can see where the fire brigade are down in this left-hand side. That's where the previous video was being taken from, looking in down this driveway to the garage and where the car was parked. So going back to this video, you can see that the main part of the house, which is here, is not involved yet. This building here is the house next door, and this is the main part of the building. And it's not even involved. It's only the car and garage that are on fire right now. So for them to say that it started at the rear just doesn't make sense with the evidence.
Exactly. It just doesn't add up. Yes, folks, electric cars, like everything else our climate zealots are forcing on us, simply don't work. The mere fact that electric cars need to be subsidised means they are crap. Anyway, folks, I've posted all the relevant links below, along with the Stopco Governance Truth Tour links as well.